Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Josh Warrington's recently announced that he is going to be pursuing the Mauricio Lara rematch, right? That's the fight he wants to take. That's the fight he's interested in having next. He's also been speaking very candidly about it and saying that, if I can't get by Mauricio Lara, I may retire. So obviously that is in the back of Josh Warrington's mind. Now, we're 2 weeks removed from the loss he had to Mauricio Lara, and it was an upset, certainly when that fight was first announced. Right, I think originally that fight was meant to be a 10-rounder, moved to 12. When that fight was first announced, I really did think Lara was just a poor choice of an opponent. I obviously backtracked on that because I kind of was like, you know what, it could be different, Lara could be useful, but we all expected Warrington to win and win comfortably. Okay, so it was a shock to a lot of people. Obviously, it wasn't a shock to Lara, but it was a shock to a lot of people that Josh Warrington lost that fight, right? So I think that it was obviously a shock to him, and I think that maybe he's just, maybe I would say recovered, but maybe he's just kind of overplaying things in his head and saying, if I can't get by this one person, then it's over for me. At the end of the day, Josh Warrington, for me, was definitely intimidated by Lara's power early on in that fight. It was apparent, in that first round he was hit with some shots, and you could really see Warrington kind of, I think the commentary were saying, Warrington came out in that first round. When I look back at that fight, I was only really watched there a few days ago. Warrington came out ready to do his normal thing, which was, go for, throw volume, fight his normal type of fight. You saw when he got caught with a few shots that he really did kind of back up. And to me, it was kind of like, I thought the first round he was kind of feeling him out because, he was out of the ring for a while. But then it became apparent that, the power was a factor, that he was respecting Mauricio Lara's power. And you also noticed there was a style issue there, because Warrington's never been in there with someone who hits that hard. You would say probably the hardest puncher he would have been in with was possibly Carl Frampton or maybe even Kid Galahad. Kid Galahad's a decent puncher, nothing special. So you saw that with Warrington. You saw him struggle there, and you saw him obviously get taken out. You saw that Lara poses a style issue to Josh Warrington, okay? He has beaten guys like Kid Galahad, like Carl Frampton, like Lee Selby, who on paper are better fighters than Mauricio Lara, okay? Mauricio Lara, for my money, poses a style issue for Josh Warrington, and I don't think that Josh Warrington should be taking or pursuing this rematch. At the end of the day, Josh Warrington gave up his IBF title before this fight, so it's not like he went in there and gave Lara a voluntary defense and lost his title. No, there's nothing to necessarily gain other than a bit of pride from rematching Mauricio Lara. Josh Warrington recently said that he spoke with Anthony Joshua subsequently after that fight, after his loss, and he asked about AJ. He asked AJ about how did he cope with the Ruiz fight, and it was very interesting because Josh Warrington said that AJ said that for a couple of days after, he stayed in his hotel room just kind of reflecting on things, going over it. I think he said he was even emotional at one point, obviously in 2019, reflecting it, but obviously he was able to get back in camp, was business as usual. Now, that's all well and good. AJ took that rematch for a lot of reasons. Obviously it was to get his titles back, to avenge the loss. But for me, and you can go back and watch some of my videos in 2019, I always felt AJ would win the rematch because I always felt that Andy Ruiz, the blueprint is there on how to beat Andy Ruiz. And AJ, he had success against Andy Ruiz in the first fight. He had Andy Ruiz down. He was outboxing for the first couple of rounds. Andy Ruiz could be outboxed. We know, it's no secret, there's a blueprint how to beat Andy Ruiz. Joseph Parker did it, AJ did it. You keep him at long range, he's slow feet, right? Especially if you can punch as well. You can get his respect. He's not going to be on you like, bad smell. With Josh Warrington and Mauricio Lara, it's like Warrington's been talking about, staying on the back foot and boxing him. Well, that's all well and good, but he doesn't have the height and reach that AJ had, and he doesn't have the power that AJ has. I know we're talking about featherweights as opposed to heavyweights, but still, at least look at it like this, right? When I watched that fight, and I watched it a couple of times now, especially the 8th round, you see Warrington land hooks on Mauricio Lara, and he just kind of nods his head, not in approval, it's just kind of like, well, you've hit me, but, and what? Is that it? So, that's Josh Warrington trying to, go in there and overwhelm the guy, and trying to land as clean as he can. If he boxes, what's he going to do to keep Lara off of him with? And we already saw that Warrington is wide open to the counter left hooks Lara was throwing. He couldn't miss with those left hooks. So for me, looking at Josh Warrington, two things. One, why take a rematch? Why don't you just go and maybe try and have a little rebuild fight again? Look at some of the guys you've beaten. You've beaten better guys than this, So that's not to disrespect Mauricio Lara, but on paper, Lee Selby, Carl Frampton are better wins. The fact, one's a 2-weight world champion, one's a former world champion. Mauricio Lara, with the great respect, we don't know how good he can be. We don't know what his ceiling is. So, I'm just going to say on paper at the minute, those 2 wins are better, which they are. So, with Warrington, I wonder, would he be best advised to maybe, go in a different direction, look for a fight against someone else? He seems set to take this rematch. He seems to want it. I think talking of retirement, if you lose, at the end of the day, maybe that's not actually in the back of Josh Warrington's mind. Maybe he's kind of using that to kind of, how do I describe, motivate himself sufficiently. Some fighters are like that. Some fighters, they put pressure on themselves because they feel it makes them perform better. A good example would be Tyson Fury and Chris Eubank Sr. They would talk themselves up before going into a fight. They would put an enormous amount of pressure on themselves, but it helped raise their game. You really did notice that. You see the road, but saying that, it's a double-edged sword, because other fighters have done that, like Audley Harrison, and it's come back to bite them. Now, I'm not saying Audley Harrison would have, gone on to be a world beater if he hadn't have, put so much pressure on himself during his pro career, but I definitely think that he didn't. The pressure he was putting on himself by talking himself up, this, that, and the other, I don't think it helped him at all. In fact, it definitely didn't help him. So I wonder if Warrington is maybe looking at this and saying, maybe I need to really motivate myself more for this because maybe I wasn't motivated, etc., etc. And I had to say, you know what, I'm done if I don't win this fight. Maybe he's looking at it from that angle. For me, Josh Warrington, having seen the fight, Josh Warrington, I don't think he's going to win this rematch. For me, it was apparent that he respected. It was apparent that the punching power of Lara bothered Josh Warrington early on, and yeah, Warrington could change his style. Maybe change it on the fly and try and box, but Warrington is not a big puncher. What is he going to? If he decides to box in the back foot and Lara has to come at him? Lara's shown me that he has actually decent skills at cutting the ring off. He is a decent counter puncher. He can pressure. What's Josh Warrington going to hit Lara with? It's going to turn from being like bad smell all over him. Well, from what I can see, not really much. So I just don't know, and that was a crushing defeat. I just, for me, I don't see the logic in taking the rematch personally. You could definitely get a shot against one of the champions as a voluntary potentially. You definitely could take a fight against someone who maybe is a bit more fitting to you stylistically and just get a rebuild. I don't see why he's in such a rush to get in there. Maybe it's a pride thing, but as the saying goes, pride cometh before a fall. And I like Josh Warrington, make no mistake about it. Many people will know I've always sang Josh Warrington's praises on this channel, for whenever I've covered him. And even before I started making videos, I liked Josh Warrington. I remember back in 2018, before I was doing videos, when he fought Lee Selby, I was convinced from the get-go who's going to beat Lee Selby, So I've always been a fan of Josh Warrington, but with this, when you're dealing with a style issue, it's so much different. Like, for argument's sake, right? And this may be a different analogy, but if you're fighting a journeyman, like we'll say a Kamil Sakalowski, who is a very, very good journeyman, very durable journeyman, a heavyweight, and very, he can punch. And say you're a bit lackadaisical, and you walk into a big shot and get, stopped. That's not necessarily a style issue. That could be you just switching off and just walking into a shot. You could rematch him, and you could win comfortably on points or potentially stop him. But when you see someone who style actually really does it really does counteract you, as the saying goes, styles make fights. It's a lot more tricky, especially when that guy has knocked you out, and beaten you convincingly. It's a lot more different. And one thing as well, this is just something I want to chuck in there. I still haven't been able to find the scorecards for that fight. I never remember, that was a dodgy decision on that card with Zephyr Barrett versus Kiko Martinez. I still love to see what those scorecards look like. I really would. But for me, that's just my thoughts on this. So Josh Warrington, I like Josh Warrington. I do. I think his dad's a good trainer, irrespective of what some people may say about him letting the fight go on a bit longer. Yeah, they could have stopped it sooner, but, it is what it is. I wouldn't be speaking so candidly about retirement unless you were actually planning on doing it, because some fighters thrive on pressure, some don't. We don't really know about Josh Warrington, but you don't want to make unnecessary decisions either over one loss, That's the thing goes. Like, some people believe a loss is the end of the world. Josh Warrington could have a style problem there, and I think he definitely does with Lara. As I said before, he could, say he doesn't fight Mauricio Lara, and say he fights someone like a Gary Russell Jr., may play more, may suit him more, may suit into Josh Warrington's style a bit more. He could maybe might not win, but he could definitely look a lot better than he did against Lara, just from a styles point of view, you know? That's what I got to say on that. I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. What would you advise Warrington to do? Take the fight, or just, you know, go in a different direction, you know? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, lads, smash the like button. Subscribe, of course, if you're new. If you like the content, hashtag GMansRocks, all that good stuff. Lads and lassies, I'll talk to you. Peace.